Welcome to the Commander's Journey, a journey for new Commander players ready to uncover their hidden magic potential.
Welcome back. I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
And today we have another deck tech for you, Hallar the Firefletcher. So this is a really fun deck to do because there's a new mechanic that kind of came back with this latest set, Zendikar Rising, which was Kicker, right? And I mean, who doesn't want to build a Kicker deck? Am I wrong, Alex?
You know, Hallar is a perfect example of a fun, unique Kicker deck that plays a little differently, but often fits in the theme that Kicker already has. Now, in the newest set, Kicker was a little bit in green and blue, and of course, Hallar is red and green. But you know, those green cards will still carry over, and we can make this deck quite something interesting.
Yeah, so there's quite a few cards you were able to put in this deck from the new set, which is awesome. But this is a deck you know well. You've been using this deck for quite a while.
Yes. I built Hallar because I wanted to build something around with the uncommon legendary creatures. I built Hallar because I thought he was interesting. I rather liked how the deck played, and I thought, oh, let's do a deck tech on him since Kicker came back perfectly in theme. I'll update some of the cards in it, and we'll call it. So that's where we are, Hallar the Firefletcher.
There you go. So Hallar the Firefletcher is a red and a green for a legendary creature, Elf Archer with Trample. And whenever you cast a spell, if that spell was kicked, you put a +1/+1 counter on Hallar the Firefletcher. Then Hallar deals damage equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it to each opponent. So that's pretty cool, where you build them up and you can burn people with Hallar.
Exactly, and that's basically the themes of the deck. He's a 3/3 as well, but you basically are playing a lot of things with Kicker, so you get it automatically with Hallar, and then you're also playing a lot of +1/+1 counter matters. So a lot of things will either care about one or the other. We'll move it around, really make Hallar start doing major damage, but also do fine on their own if Hallar can't seem to stay in play.
So as we do with all our deck techs, let's first talk about our game plan synergy. The first category. So up first we have Pure Imaginative Rascal. It's 2 and a green for legendary creature human. You can partner this with Toothy Imaginary Friend. Of course, this deck won't do it because Toothy is blue, but he's a partner. If one or more counters would be put on a permanent your team controls, that many +1 of each of those kinds of counters are put on that permanent instead, and he's a 1/1.
Yeah, so Peer is an example, too, of a way that instead of every time you kick a spell, you put 1 on it, you'll start putting 2 every time. It'll start making Hallar get really huge, really fast, and you can pretty much start both burning down your opponents and swing with Hallar as he has trample. So it's really a win-win-win.
Yeah, it's definitely the budget version of like a doubling season type of effect. Not quite as good, but like Pure is fun. I think do you have a few more effects like this in the deck as well?
You know, not too many are in green and red. I know some of the other ones come to mind are like Winding Constrictor.
Yes.
Or
that's green and black,
stuff like
right?
that. Yeah, but that's a green and black, exactly. Yeah. And it's the same thing. Like Toothy also works great, not to add counters, but to really get card draw.
Take advantage, yeah.
That's in blue, so we had to work a little bit around the color combo, but there are advantages to being in red and green that are unique to red and green, specifically the angle on burn and the fact you can kind of win out of nowhere if the situation calls for it.
Yes, definitely one of the best color pairings out there, red and green. So the next card in our game plans is Calonian Hydra. It's 3 green and a green for a creature Hydra with trample, and Calonian Hydra enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it, and whenever Calonian Hydra attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. He comes in as a 0/0, of course, with those 4 counters. But that's a really cool effect that whenever he attacks, you double the number of counters on each creature.
And this gets out of hand real quick.
Wow.
You're great to attack with Hallar. It's one of those ones, it's a win condition in and of itself. And then also it helps the game plan out fantastically, where all of a sudden, you know, you'll double how many counters are on Hallar. And you're attacking with both of them when this happens. Or, you know, usually you're attacking with Hallar too because it also has trample. So all of a sudden you'll double the amount of counters on Hallar as you're swinging in before the damage gets dealt. So it allows combat to really be a big part of this. Plus it will help with the burn angle. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's great colors for both combat and burn.
Yes.
If I do say so myself. All this trample going on here. Speaking of trample, another game plan card in here is Loyal Guardian with 4 and a green for a creature Rhino with trample. and it's got Lieutenant. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and he comes in as a 4/4.
So Loyal Guardian's great. It has trample. It's a big creature in of itself. And what's nice about it is most of the time when you really care about +1/+1 counters the most, it's when Hallar is out. And Loyal Guardian only works when Hallar is out. So it incentivizes it on top of the fact that it rewards you for doing it. It better flows what the deck wants to do and helps it get there.
All right. Well, let's talk about the next category we like to talk about, which is ramp. So some good synergistic ramp cards in this deck. The first one I want to look at is Vastwood Surge. It's 3 and a green for a sorcery with Kicker 4. So you pay an additional 4 as you cast this spell. And it says search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. If the spell is kicked, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control.
So this is another example. This is a new one that just came out in the last set. It's rather expensive to do both abilities, but it is everything the deck wants. It's mana searching, it's kicking, it's putting +1/+1 counters on things. And it's one of those situations. Chances are you're going to cast it without the kicker, but there will times where you want the extra ping to happen with Hallar to make it go off again. And then it adds +1/+1 counters on top of it, where you'll do both, get the extra bonus, hit real hard with Hallar, and it'll be a way to really move the game along too. So it has that flexibility.
Yeah, in this deck, it's that much better to pay that extra 4 because, like you said, you're not just getting the ramp, but you're getting that burn and the counters, and especially if you're wide too. There's just a ton of value there. But at worst, like you're paying 3 and a green, and you're picking up 2 basic land cards on the battlefield. You're ramping at 4. It's really nice.
It's an explosive vegetation, which I think is perfectly fine, and I'm happy playing. So at worst, it's that, and at best, it's something that totally helps the deck out, and it really makes it do everything it wants to do.
Well, if at worst it's an explosive vegetation, I'm pretty sure it's pretty good. Pretty sure. The next card in this category is Primal Growth. It's 2 and a green for a sorcery. Its kicker is you sacrifice a creature. So you may sacrifice a creature in addition to any other cost you cast. As you cast a spell, you search your library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If Primal Growth was kicked, instead you search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield, then shuffle your library.
So Primal Growth is a great example, too, of a way to ramp. It has kicker, which matters. And, if you don't have a creature to sacrifice that you're comfortable doing with, then don't worry about it. It's not a big deal, but it's a way to not cost extra mana, but still get that kicker ability in the deck, which, especially in the earlier game, does matter. You still want to be hitting people, you sometimes still want to be in the game and start building them up from a lowly state, but, you don't have all that mana yet to do it with. Primal Growth can do it early on with very little drawback.
And another really good ramp kicker spell is Grow from the Ashes. 2 and a green for a sorcery with kicker 2, so you can pay an additional 2 mana. You search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If the spell is kicked, instead you search your library for 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield, then shuffle your library.
I love Grow from the Ashes. It's one of the better, in my opinion, ramp spells that just exist in the format in general. And what I really like about Grow from the Ashes is if they come into play untapped, both normal and when it's kicked. And that is relevant, and you can plan your turn with that in mind, where you'll have that additional 2 for whatever colors you need, especially playing a multicolored deck. So I think it's great. The kicker really works well with the deck, of course, and it's just a great, great ramp spell.
Yeah, I'm really liking this Hallar kick ability, because every time you get to play your kicker, you getting that extra burn. It's like you're literally kicking your opponent, like you can be kicking them from under the table. Oh, yeah, I'm going to kick this. Oh, I'm going to burn you. I'm going to burn you. Kick you. Kick them from under the table. Yeah, that's probably anyways. The next category we like to talk about is card draw. So some real good card draw synergy. Let's talk about the first card here that you have here is, let me say it right, Sitano? How do you say that?
I have no clue. Sentinel is what I've always pronounced,
Sentinel.
But I did not play in the set that Sentinel first came out.
Sentinel Wood Readers. For 2 and a green, creature human druid with kicker 2 and a green, so you can pay an additional 2 and a green. And when Sentinel Wood Readers enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you draw 2 cards. It's a 1/4.
Yeah, and it's an example, again, of kicker, so it matters for the deck. It works well with it, and then on top of it, when you kick it, it's a card draw spell. So it's one of those ones. A lot of our ones that are synergistic just happen to have kicker on it and are doing things already. So it's one of those situations which is exactly what you want these decks to do. You want them to do, your card draw, your ramp, or your removal, or whatever you have to do, and then also give a little bonus for your deck. And this is a perfect example of that. It really helps it out.
Yeah, and paying 3 to draw 2 cards is already decent value. But I think even a 1/4 body is nice because you are adding counters a lot of times in this deck, right? So if you start putting counters on 1/4, you can grow that Sentinel to have a pretty big butt, if you know what I mean. Next card, I'm having to do a card draw, is Path of Discovery. It's 3 and a green for an enchantment. This is whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it explores, and then in parentheses it explains and says, reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand if it's a land, otherwise put a +1/+1 counter on the creature, the one that came in, and then put the card back or put it into your graveyard.
So Path of Discovery is really interesting, and when I built the deck, Dominaria and Ixalan were very close to each other. It really helped with the deck in that it's card draw because you're going to put the lands in your hand if you draw them, so it'll keep the deck smooth and consistent. Or if not, you'll spread around the +1/+1 counters a little bit, and even though you only get the 1 proc for Hallar generally when it comes into play, often you'll help buff other things up. It helps a go wide or a go tall strategy for other things in play. Helps with card draw, helps smooth out your lands. It's doing a little bit of everything, and then on top of it, it's not quite scrying. What's the name of the new mechanic with Dimir, Joel? Do you happen to remember? That was Ravnica. It's in your...
I don't.
Your rogue deck. I don't know why everyone's who's
you're
watching us right now.
It's not Milling. It's the other one, right?
No, it's not. Surveil. There we go.
Surveil, yeah.
But it's everyone's screaming it at the YouTube video or on their podcast.
No,
going,
actually, I don't have a
guys?"
Surveil card in there, I don't think.
Oh, really?
No, I don't.
I'm surprised.
No.
Well, anyways, it's a little bit like Surveil in that you can either put it on top or in the graveyard. So you can either leave it there or put it, somewhere else. But I mean, like, it's really flexible. It helps smooth out your deck. It's just doing a little bit of everything. And even if it's not so directly in theme with the deck, it still definitely helps it out, and it does synergize well with everything the deck's trying to do.
Yeah, I like cards like this because I feel like you get it out, and even if you don't feel like you get a ton of value at the top, like right when you play it, a few turns in after this, where you put this down turn 3 or 4, by turn 6 or 7, you're probably not going to get stagnant, because that's when you're worried, right, that you might get stagnant by not having enough card draw or ramp. This thing will probably always be doing something for you, like you said. So I like cards like this because they kind of help keep you moving forward in the game.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, so let's get into our next category. We like to talk about single target removal. So let's talk about some synergistic single target removal cards. First one is from M19. This is a good card. Vivian of the Arcbow. It's 4, a green and a green for legendary planeswalker Vivian. For its +2 abilities, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature. So I'd assume put that on Halal because you want to be burning people for more.
Generally.
Its -3 is target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. There's your removal. And its -9 is creatures you control get +4/+4 and gain trample until end of turn. And it comes in with 5 loyalty.
So Vivian's a perfect example too. It's a removal spell because of the -3, and it's nice because it's one-sided, which you don't see. It's not quite fight. It's one-sided fight where you just deal its damage to something else. You can cleanly take something out. The +1 will generally help a Hallar, and what it's trying to do is you generally put it all in Hallar anyways. And then if you happen to get it to its -9, it's a win condition. It'll probably win you the game in that moment in theory. So, it's one of those situations where this deck has a lot of good synergistic, ramp has a lot of good synergistic card draw, single target removal, just a lot of things work well with Kicker. And this is an example of it where it's putting the +1/+1 counters on Hallar while removing things.
It's very nice. I'm so glad you added this next card in. because I was like wondering when the set was being teased, like where would this fit? Inscription of Abundance is 1 and a green for an instant. It's got Kicker for 2 and a green. And you choose one. If the spell was kicked, you choose any number instead, so you can choose multiple. So for a total of 5, you can choose 2 or 3 of these. The first one is put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature. The next one is target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. And the third one is target creature you control fights target creature you don't control.
So you'll generally use this either for its normal ability and then be either putting counters or removal spelling it. Chances are you're not going to use the life gain thing. Or sometimes you'll go for the kicker cost, which I think will happen the most of the time. You'll get the proc off. You put the plus counters on Hallar. You'll get the kicker trigger on the stack. Allow it to do that damage, and then on top of it you'll happen to just also remove something and gain some life. So that's extra icing on the cake. Just the putting the +1/+1 counters and kicking it is what will get the deck moving forward, and the other things just come with it.
Mm-hmm. And if you can't pay the kicker cost because it's early and you just need to do something, and you pay 1 and a green, and you can just have one of your big creatures fight another creature, right? It's a 1 and a green for an instant removal, basically, if you needed to use it for that.
And just to be clear, I realized I wasn't. Technically, Hallar would trigger first, and then Inscription of Abundance, all its effects would happen. So just keep that in mind. It's a cast trigger, which does help too. It means if it gets countered, it's still going to use its ability.
There you go. So it's a really good single target removal synergy for this deck. Let's talk about some good synergistic board wipes. The first one here is... is Comet Storm. For X, red and red, it's an instant. It's got multi-kicker 1, so you may pay an additional 1 any number of times as you cast this spell. And you choose any target, then choose another target for each time the spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them.
Yes, so... this is example, again, it has multi-kicker, which means you can kick it multiple times. And then this is one of those ones where for every time it was kicked, you can keep on dealing X times. So you can choose one target, then another target, and then keep on going. And the more targets you pick, the more damage you can, did based on the amount of mana you put in. So it gets a little complicated, but you do your math. Realize that you can take out 6 things and do 4 damage to each of them. Sure enough, boom, you take them all out. It costs you some mana, but boy, was it worth it, right? It's very flexible. It can be single target removal, or sometimes it can be mass board wipe. It really is going to depend.
And you still only get 1 kicker trigger though on Halal, right? With this,
yes, that is true. Because it's on. It's the spell was kicked at all is all it cares about. It doesn't care about the number of times it was kicked.
Yeah. I just always got to clarify that for myself. If I'm looking at it as a newer player, I'm like, I'm going to make sure it does what I want it to do. But it's still I like the flexibility of this card, right? Where you could just utilize it to take out one thing if you need to, right? One big threat, which happens quite often. Or if you need to have a really good board wipe, this is a very flexible card.
And it's another example, too, of all of a sudden, the tables are turned. It's your turn. It's an instant spell, so you can do it really fast and surprise someone. Or, you can hit a player. It's any target, including players.
Yeah.
So if you want to, if you realize you're going to just need to kick it, you can cost very little. You can aim for a player's face. Then Hallar triggers, at the same time. Mm-hmm. Boom, all of a sudden Hallar goes, and then Comet Storm goes. You can take out a player.
Or save up all that red mana. What was that Hellkite guy right there? And then use this as a political piece. Hey, you want me to finish that guy off for you? And then you can utilize that mana in that way. That's awesome. I love that card, Comet Storm. So the other really good synergistic board wipe we have here is Molten Disaster. For X, a red and a red for a sorcery with kicker red. You may pay an additional red as you cast a spell. If Molten Disaster was kicked, it has split second. So as long as the spell's on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. And Molten Disaster deals X damage to each creature without flying and each player.
So another perfect example is you'll do damage to players. It'll kick out every creature without flying. So it's nice board wipe-esque. And then chances are you're going to kick it to get the Hallar trigger. And then on top of it, they can't respond to it. They can't counterspell it. There's nothing they can do. They can't activate an ability in response. It's going to happen and it's going to go off. So you really, it's a nice form of protection on it.
Love this card. So let's get into our next category, which is recursion and protection. So let's look at some good synergistic recursion and protection spells here. First one up is Vines of Vastwood for 1 green. It's an instant with Kicker green, and you pay 1 green. It says target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. If Vines of Vastwood was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn.
So this is just a quick hexproof pretty much on a creature in a moment of, oh my god, Hallar is getting targeted, he's about to die, boom, throw it on there, can't be targeted, save it, potentially for a turn, then you can kick it so you can get an extra trigger on it, really punish him for it. This deck in general, one of the struggles that it will run into is that if Hallar gets taken out, the deck, even though it can function just fine without Hallar, it has a go wide thing it can do with +1/+1 counters. It'll still work just fine. The deck is meant to use around Hallar, so a lot of what the extra bits in the deck are trying to do is protect it and protect him. So because of that, there's things like Vines, Asceticism is in the deck. There are ways that make it hard to take out Hallar so he can continue to do his burn thing, and you can just use him to win as your win condition.
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever seen this card. I love it. I mean, I love this for other decks, too. I mean, just to give your commander or give somebody, give them that instant hexproof. And then, of course, if you're being attacked or blocking, you need that extra +4/+4. You got that as well. That's a good card.
It's definitely a flexible combat trick. The main thing is if you're going to pay 2 mana, you might as well Heroic Intervention instead, which is also in the deck. But what's nice is, again, Vines does have the kicker trigger. It can trigger Hallar, so it's doing multi-duty there.
All right. Another really good card in this category is Verdant Confluence. For 4 green, it's a sorcery. It says choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. So put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Or search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library.
And I could have put this into ramp, but I chose not to. Just put it in recursion instead. But this is another example of it's doing everything the deck wants to do, and it's so flexible. I love Verdant Confluence. I don't think it goes into enough decks. Heck, I have trouble putting it in decks all the time, but I have no excuse in this deck. It works fantastically with it, and it's, again, recursion, it's ramp, it's doing what the deck wants to do. So you can either really pump up Hallar for a big trigger, or you can, bring a bunch of stuff back, or whatever you just need, Verdant Confluence will assist with.
I mean, recursion, ramp, like you said, just making Hallar huge, and then utilizing that burn. So good, so good. So as you, that's some really good synergy right there. Let's get into the next category. We'd like to talk about just some alt win cons. So you talked about the game plan really being kicker and +1/+1, right? So what kind of win cons and alt win cons are we talking about?
So there's a couple of alt win cons. Vivian's a good example of something. If you happen to ultimate, she just happens to help you win the game. We have a couple of token makers, but really what it comes down to with the alt win con is you're going to try to burn them out. If something goes wrong with Hallar and you're having trouble stabilizing the board, usually one comes with the other. They're going wide. They're doing multiple board wipes. You can't keep Hallar in play. You can just forgo all of that. Just as we saw with Comet Storm or Molten Disaster, there's a number of cards in the deck that will just burn your opponent. So push comes to shove, ramp a bunch, burn them out. You can use it to help bridge the gap between if you've done some damage and then they start taking over the game, help come back. It's just an alternate way to take out a player or multiple players when push comes to shove.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you're going to be smacking people in the face, utilizing this kicker, and that burn, I mean, you've played this deck quite a bit, so, how often do you see that coming into play?
I have had to win that way once with Hallar. Most of the rest of the time, either Hallar will win on his own by getting multiple triggers and successfully protecting him, and I've won combat damage-wise once or twice, but usually Hallar was also a part of that, where he's also swinging in, being a big trampler, and then just also happens to be burning them down.
Yeah. And so, to clarify for our newer players like myself, when he's burning people, even though he's your commander, that doesn't count as commander damage, right?
No, it's combat
has to be
damage
combat
that matters
damage.
with commander damage. So the burn won't do it, but him swinging for the trample damage will be commander damage. And it's not hard to make him a huge. I mean, if you really, let's say you threw, even with cards we just talked about, if you have a Vivian in play, you happen to do a Verdant Confluence.
And Piers out
you
there.
know, and Piers out there. If all three of those are out there, and let's just say out of nowhere, he becomes that is +7, then +3, and then all of a sudden he's that's a 16. Yeah, +7, +3. He's a 13/13 off just out of nowhere, just from that alone. And then on top of that, let's say you have a Colonian Hydra out, all of a sudden he's swinging for lethal every time he swings, right? Like there's some +1/+1 counter doublers here in the deck as well. He can steal a win with commander damage out of nowhere.
It's really, really good. So, again, really awesome, fun colors to play with. So let's talk about our next category. We like to talk about, you always like to just bring up some of the weaknesses of the deck so that we can kind of flesh out what things it might not be great against.
Yes, and actually we just brought up one that does affect it. Because a lot of what the deck wants to do is burn, the natural opposite of burn is life gain. A heavy life gain deck, Hallar will struggle with, and he generally has to win with commander damage in that scenario because you can't emergency burn out. He can't, if someone's controlling the board and life gaining, you better hope to God you're getting one or two good swings with Hallar because otherwise commander damage is your only way to win that game. Another one is hexproof. As you see, a lot of things target it with the removal in red and green, with fighting or with doing burn. So a lot of hexproof will hurt the deck, and same thing with a lot of burn. Indestructibility will make it hard as well. So those are the main three things: is life gain, hexproof, and indestructibility.
And awesome. And then with most of our decks, we like to stick right around the 250 mark as far as price. But if we needed to add some upgrades, people had the extra change to throw at this, let's talk about some of these easy upgrades. Obvious one, it's in green. We didn't put it in the deck because it's really expensive, but it's awesome. It's probably one of the best cards in Commander. It's Doubling Season. It's 4 and a green for an enchantment. If an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. And if an effect would put one or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many of those counters on that permanent instead.
This deck gets helped out with Doubling Season more than almost any other deck I think we've done.
Yeah.
If you have one lying around, this is the perfect deck to throw it in. It will help out the power level of this deck so much. It's definitely the quick add. It's just also $40, and it really puts that heavy over the mark. I think right now this deck is around $230 price wise as the time recording this, and Doubling Season will make it a lot more expensive. So we didn't include it, but throw it in if you have one.
If you have one lying around, or if you want to use our affiliate link and purchase one on TCG Player, you can go ahead and do that too. We don't mind. Another really good easy upgrade, it is a more pricey card as well, is Yavimaya Hollow. It's a legendary land. It says tap to add 1 to your mana pool. Or you pay a green and tap it and you regenerate target creature.
And this is another example. Again, Hallar gets targeted a lot. It's a weakness of the deck if Hallar gets taken out too often. It does have a lot of stuff to protect it, and it's just another addition that's just going to take up a land slot to do so. So Yavimaya Hollow fits fantastic in the deck and really helps it out if you happen to have one.
I think, did you put a Teamer Sabretooth in this one as well?
Yes, it is.
Because, that's also a really good card when you got...
I have a lot of the go-to green protection things, especially around the time I built the deck.
Yeah.
Everything that I could to protect it, I put in. And then there's a couple things that either price-wise or I just haven't added in that are newer cards, so it might be worth to keep in mind. I tried to update it all I could based on the new kicker cards and all that, but I'm sure I might have easily missed one. So happen to come up with something else, throw it in the deck. Protecting Hallar is important and will help the deck run smoother.
So just for you guys who might not know, if you just look below, I put the bit.ly links. We have an architect of this. He's put the entire deck together. And there'll also be another link for our TCG Player. You can look at the deck list there and actually just purchase the whole deck if you wanted, or just look at the different pieces. And then we have our affiliate link. So look at those below. Definitely check that out. This is a fun looking deck. I know I didn't get a chance to play it against you this time. Usually we play these decks against each other, but you've been playing this one for a while, so yeah.
Hallar is a fun deck, and you can even take out some of the more expensive cards that we've added in here and make this a little more budget. We didn't do a budget version because I haven't played that version. We didn't have enough time before recording this one to play it. But you could probably do a budget version of this and still get away with it. But Hallar is one of those decks. It's really fun to play. And it doesn't look as fun on the surface sometimes, but trust me, playing it, it plays in a unique way for burn, a unique way for combat, and it's really fun to play.
I believe you. You know, when I was first looking at this, you're telling me you're going to do Hallar deck. I'm like, okay. And then when you sent me the list, I'm like, oh, okay. Because, I mean, that synergy of kicking and then the +1/+1, it's, you know, in Commander, it might not, like, a lot of people like to do these big, huge combo-y type things, but we like to play a lot of, you know, good, fun, grindy games. This deck will grind you and burn you while you're playing it, so it definitely looks like a lot of fun. We'll have to get a game in before the end of the week.
Yeah.
On this one,
Oh, there you go. Yeah, this is one of those ones too. Again, the synergy is fantastic. Everything lives synergy, and I know what I love. Whenever you get a deck from us, I like flexibility in the decks. I don't like ever feeling like I'm out of a game, even if the chances are low that I come back into where I'm going to win. I don't like feeling out. And this deck really, there's always a way you can maneuver to stay in the game or win the game. So it's a fun one to play as, and it's very different than your average Gruul deck.
Exactly. And definitely check out the Arca deck. I mean, I'm just browsing through here, too. I noticed you did 35 lands, but you have 2 of those newer flip lands. So,
you nailed it.
Yep, you have an instant.
You'll see some more of those in the future. Because I updated for the new set, I'm keeping that in mind. There's more I probably could have added in, but I didn't feel it helped it as much. But, you know, those flip lands, man, they're going to start going in everything.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we always recommend 37 lands. So, yeah, I mean, I think this nuts, especially Balagad Recovery. If you that card, you just got to put it in every green deck. I don't know why
I'm
you
telling
want
you,
it.
I thought that the second I saw that card, it needs to go freaking every green deck.
Yeah.
I'm going back and adding it to every green deck.
Yeah, I know. I still need to go buy myself like a handful of those. Those are good cards. I think I got like 2. Anyway, that'll do it for today. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate the support. And when you guys make comments down below, it really encourages us and also helps us get direction. If you have ideas, suggestions, help out your other Commander players with suggestions for this deck. If there's something in it you don't think we put in or something you would do a little different, let's talk about it below. Really love hearing from you guys. And thanks again. Check out, be sure to subscribe. Check out our affiliate link if you're going to purchase any cards. Yeah, I think that'll do it.
See ya.